The morning sun streamed through the gaps in the curtains of the mansion in the Cotswolds, but Beatrice had been awake for hours. Her fingers flew across the keyboard of the old laptop hidden under her bed as she finished revising her latest article on sustainable economic development in rural communities. It was 5:30 in the morning, and she knew she had only another 30 minutes before the house began to stir and her real obligations began. Obligations. That was the word that defined her existence in that house. At 24, Beatrice was treated less like a daughter and more like an invisible employee, someone whose only purpose was to ensure that the lives of her father, Robert, and her older sister, Valentina, ran without the slightest inconvenience. She saved the document, closed the laptop, and hid it back in the secret compartment she had built beneath the floorboards. No one in the family even suspected she had a computer, much less that she published academic articles under the pseudonym B. Santos in international economics journals. To them, Beatrice was simply the plain daughter, the talentless one, the worthless one. Beatrice's room was at the back of the house, small, poorly lit space that had originally been a pantry. While Valentina occupied a spacious suite with a walk-in closet and a private bathroom, Beatrice shared a tiny bathroom with a utility area. But she had learned long ago not to question these things. Questioning only brought on Robert's fury. She dressed quickly in simple clothes and went down to the kitchen. The first task of the day was always to prepare the elaborate breakfast Valentina demanded: scrambled eggs with fine herbs, toast with imported jam, freshly squeezed orange juice, and pour-over coffee. Everything had to be perfect, or Valentina would complain to their father, and Robert would find a way to punish Beatrice, usually by cutting the ridiculous allowance she received or forbidding her from visiting her mother. Helen, Beatrice's mother, was in her room on the second floor. She suffered from a chronic heart condition that required expensive medication and regular appointments with specialists. Robert controlled every penny spent on Helen's treatment, using her health as an invisible chain that kept the entire family bound to his will. If anyone displeased him, he would threaten to suspend payment for the medicines. It was a cruel and effective form of blackmail. Beatrice finished preparing the breakfast and went up with a simpler tray for her mother's room. Helen was awake, propped up against the pillows, with the pallor that had become permanent in recent years. "Mum, I brought your tea and toast," Beatrice said softly, placing the tray on the small table beside the bed. Helen smiled, but it was a sad smile, laden with guilt and helplessness. "Thank you, my dear. You've always been so good to me." Beatrice held her mother's cold hand for a moment. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," Helen lied, as she always did. "I don't want you to worry about me." But Beatrice did worry. She worried every day, every night. Watching her mother slowly waste away, trapped by a man who used her illness as a weapon, was a silent torture. And Helen, too frail to fight, simply accepted it all, watching in silence as her husband turned Beatrice's life into a living hell. "Beatrice," Robert's voice thundered from downstairs, "where is Valentina's breakfast? She's waiting." Beatrice quickly squeezed her mother's hand and hurried downstairs. In the dining room, Valentina was sitting at the table, examining her perfectly manicured nails, while Robert read the newspaper with an expression of permanent disapproval. Valentina was 27 and considered the family's beauty. Long blonde hair, always impeccably styled, tanned skin, designer clothes. She was the image Robert wanted to project to the world: success, beauty, superiority. The fact that Valentina had no job, hadn't studied beyond secondary school, and spent her days at beauty salons and lunching with friends was irrelevant. She was beautiful, and in Robert's distorted view, that was what mattered. "You took long enough," Valentina said without even looking at Beatrice, "and I hope you squeezed the orange juice properly this time. There was a pip in it last time." "Sorry," Beatrice murmured, placing the tray on the table. Robert lowered his newspaper and looked at Beatrice with the contempt she knew so well. "You're getting sloppy. You need to try harder. After all, it's not as if you have any other qualities to make up for it." Valentina laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "It's true, Daddy. At least I have my looks. Beatrice has nothing." The words were like knives, but Beatrice had developed an armor over the years. She simply lowered her head and returned to the kitchen. She washed the dishes. She allowed herself to think about the article she had finished that morning. It was a brilliant piece of work. She knew it. It analyzed the economic impacts of microcredit programs in marginalized communities and proposed an innovative model for sustainable development. She had already received positive feedback from renowned economists who had no idea that B. Santos was a young woman trapped in a house in the Cotswolds, treated like a maid by her own family. This double life was what kept her sane. In the stolen hours of the early morning and late night, she was someone else. She was a respected intellectual, an important voice in international academic debates. But during the day, she was back to being just Beatrice, the ugly daughter, the useless daughter, the daughter who didn't matter. The afternoon was fading when Robert arrived home with an expression Beatrice couldn't decipher. There was excitement in his eyes, but also calculation, that mercenary coldness that appeared whenever he saw a business opportunity. "Valentina, come here," he called, completely ignoring Beatrice as she passed through the hallway. "I have news." Valentina came down the stairs in her designer dress, all smiles and expectation. "What is it, Daddy?" "I've secured a meeting with Gabriel Almeida," Robert said, and even Beatrice, trying to make herself invisible near the kitchen door, stopped to listen. That name was known throughout the UK. Gabriel Almeida, the London billionaire, a magnate of oil and technology, a philanthropist, one of the most powerful and influential figures in the country. He was looking for a wife. Valentina let out a squeal of delight. "Daddy, you did it. I always knew you'd make it happen." Robert smiled, that predatory smile Beatrice knew so well. He saw Valentina as an investment, a valuable commodity that could finally be traded for power and connections. "The meeting is tomorrow in London. We're going to impress him. With your beauty and our family name, he won't be able to resist." Beatrice returned silently to the kitchen, feeling a mixture of relief and pity. Relief because the family's attention was focused on something other than her failings. Pity for Valentina, despite everything, because she was being sold off like livestock at market. But Valentina seemed ecstatic at the prospect, so perhaps she didn't need pity. The next day, Robert and Valentina left early for London. Beatrice took advantage of their absence to spend more time with Helen, reading to her, talking, simply being present. The moments when they had the house to themselves were rare, and Beatrice treasured them. But when Robert's car returned late that afternoon, something was terribly wrong. She heard the door slam shut, heavy, angry footsteps in the hall. Valentina was running up the stairs, sobbing, a hysterical cry that echoed through the house. Beatrice left her mother's room and found Robert in the hallway, his face red with fury. "What happened?" Robert turned to her with an expression of such intense rage that Beatrice took a step back. "That man, that damned billionaire, he rejected Valentina, said she was empty, superficial, that she had no substance." Beatrice blinked, surprised. "But how?" "And there's more," Robert continued, his voice trembling with indignation. "He said that if I wanted any kind of alliance with him, I'd have to send you, the daughter who's good for nothing. He wants to meet you." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Beatrice felt the blood run cold in her veins. Why would Gabriel Almeida, a man who could have any woman in the country, want to meet her? Robert approached her, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of anger and greed. "I'm sending you to London, but don't get any ideas. This is clearly a test. He wants to see how ridiculous you are, so he can appreciate how perfect Valentina is in comparison. You'll serve as a contrast, and when he realizes the mistake he's made, I'll have my alliance, and you will have finally been useful for something in this family." Beatrice said nothing. There was nothing to say. She simply nodded, returned to her tiny room, and closed the door. She sat on the bed, her heart pounding, her mind racing. Gabriel Almeida wanted to meet her. But why? What did he know? What had he discovered? An impossible possibility began to form in her mind, so absurd she almost laughed. But it couldn't be. There was no way he could know. No way anyone could have connected B. Santos to Beatrice, Robert's invisible daughter. Or could they? The train journey to London was a surreal experience. Robert had bought her the cheapest possible ticket, and Beatrice found herself squeezed into a middle seat between two strangers. He hadn't come with her. He had simply put her on the train as if he were shipping a parcel, with curt instructions not to embarrass the family any more than she already did, just by existing. Beatrice looked out the window whenever the passenger beside her leaned away, watching the countryside rush by. Inside the worn bag she carried, hidden in a secret compartment she had sewn herself, was a USB drive with all her articles, her academic credentials, her publication certificates. She didn't know why she had brought them, she just felt she should. The car waiting for her at the station was completely different from what she had imagined. It wasn't an ostentatious limousine, but a discreet, elegant saloon. The driver, a middle-aged man named Anthony, was courteous and professional, treating her with a respect Beatrice was not used to receiving. "Miss Beatrice, a pleasure to have you with us. Mr. Almeida is waiting for you at the office. The journey should take about 40 minutes with the traffic at this hour." Beatrice nodded, still trying to process everything. London stretched out around her, immense and vibrant, so different from the isolated tranquility of the Cotswolds. Skyscrapers rose against the sky. People hurried along the pavements, cars filled the avenues. It was a completely different world, and she felt simultaneously frightened and strangely free. The Almeida Enterprises building was a tower of glass and steel in the heart of Canary Wharf. When Beatrice entered the lobby, she couldn't help but look up, impressed by the atrium that soared for several floors, flooded with natural light. Everything there breathed success, power, efficiency. An assistant led her to a private lift that went straight to the 40th floor. Beatrice watched her reflection in the mirrored lift doors and almost didn't recognize herself. She was dressed in simple clothes, her brown hair tied in a messy bun, no makeup, no adornments. Next to Valentina, she had always seemed drab. But now, alone in that lift, looking at her own image, she wondered for the first time in years who she really was when no one was telling her. The doors opened directly into a panoramic office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of London. And there, standing by the window, was Gabriel Almeida. He was younger than Beatrice had expected, perhaps 35, with dark hair and intense eyes that seemed to capture every detail. There was a natural elegance about him, a stillness that conveyed more power than any show of force could. He wore an impeccable suit, but there was something in his posture that suggested he was perfectly comfortable, as if this world of luxury and power were simply his second skin. "Beatrice," he said, and there was genuine warmth in his voice. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." She sat in one of the leather armchairs, her hands clasped in her lap to keep them from trembling. Gabriel sat opposite her, not behind the imposing mahogany desk, but in the armchair beside it, removing the physical barrier between them. "I imagine you're confused," he began, and Beatrice almost laughed, because confused was a tremendous understatement. "Let me be direct. I have no interest in marriage. I never have. Your father came to offer me your sister as if she were a commodity, and I rejected him because Valentina is not the kind of person I'd want to spend 5 minutes with, let alone a lifetime." Beatrice blinked, surprised by his brutal honesty. "Then why did you ask me here?" Gabriel leaned forward, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her hold her breath for a moment. "Because I know who you are, Beatrice, or should I say B. Santos?" The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. "How do you know that?" Gabriel smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I have a very competent research team. When your father came to offer me Valentina, I did what I always do. I investigated the family completely, and I discovered something fascinating. Brilliant articles on social economics published in respected international journals, all signed by a B. Santos. I traced the IP address, the email accounts, the writing patterns. They all led to you." Beatrice felt a mixture of terror and something that might have been relief. "My family doesn't know. I know, and that's why you're here. I've read all your articles, Beatrice. Every single one. Your work on sustainable economic development in marginalized communities is revolutionary. Your analysis of microcredit and female empowerment should be required reading in every university in the country. You have a brilliant mind." His words echoed in the silent office. No one had ever spoken to Beatrice like that. No one had ever seen value in her, recognized her work, her intelligence, her existence beyond her domestic duties. "I'm not interested in a wife," Gabriel continued, "but I am desperately interested in hiring you. I'm expanding our social and sustainable development division. I need someone to lead this initiative, someone with vision, intelligence, and a genuine passion for the work. I want you to be my executive director of social development." Beatrice sat completely still. She was sure she had misheard. "You want to hire me? For an executive position?" "Yes, with a salary that reflects your competence, not your family situation. With the autonomy to develop and implement programs. With the resources to make a real difference in the lives of millions. You've built an impressive academic reputation working in secret in a tiny room. Imagine what you can do with a team, with funding, with freedom." The offer was too tempting to be real, but Beatrice felt the weight of reality descend on her like a chain. "I can't," she said, and heard her own voice break. "My mother is ill. My father controls her treatment. If I defy him, if I accept this, he'll cut off her access to medication. He'll leave her without care. I can't abandon her." Gabriel was silent for a long moment. Then he stood, went to his desk, and picked up a folder. He returned and handed it to Beatrice. "Open it," he said softly. With trembling hands, Beatrice opened the folder. Inside were legal documents, medical contracts, proof of bank transfers. She began to read, slowly at first, then faster, her eyes widening with every line. "I've transferred full responsibility for your mother's medical treatment to the Almeida Foundation," Gabriel explained. "Helen now has access to the best cardiac specialists in the country. All the medication she needs, a premium health plan. Everything is paid for indefinitely by the foundation. Your father no longer has any control over her health. He can no longer use it as blackmail." Beatrice looked up at him, tears beginning to well in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's the right thing to do. And because I want you to work for me without chains, without fear, without anything tying you to a life that should never have been yours. You deserve freedom, Beatrice. You deserve to be seen, valued, respected. And more than anything, you deserve the chance to use your extraordinary gifts to make a difference in the world." The tears finally fell, silent and hot, on Beatrice's cheeks. She couldn't remember the last time someone had shown her genuine kindness. She couldn't remember the last time someone had seen value in her as a person, not as a servant. "So will you accept?" Gabriel asked. Beatrice wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and for the first time in her life made a decision just for herself. "I accept." Gabriel smiled, a broad, genuine smile that completely transformed his serious face. "Excellent. Welcome to the team, Director. Let's change the world together." They spent the next few hours discussing details. Gabriel introduced her to the team that would work under her, showed her the projects in progress, explained the resources available. Beatrice found herself contributing ideas, making suggestions, discussing strategies as if she had always done it. It was natural. It was right. It was what she was born to do. When she finally left the building as night fell, Beatrice had a signed contract, a company-provided flat, and a new work phone. She also had, for the first time in years, hope. But she knew the hard part was just beginning. Her father would not accept this passively. Robert saw Beatrice as property, as a tool, and men like him didn't let go of their tools without a fight. Her personal phone rang. It was Robert. She took a deep breath and answered. "Well?" His voice was curt, demanding. What did that man say? Did he realize his mistake? Does he want Valentina now? "No, Father," Beatrice said, and her voice was firmer than it had ever been. "He offered me a job, and I accepted. I'm going to live in London and work for Almeida Enterprises." There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. Then the explosion came, as predictable as a storm. "You did what? You don't have permission to accept anything. You're coming home immediately, you ungrateful girl. And what about your mother? I'll cut off her medication right now." "No, you won't," Beatrice said calmly. "Mum's treatment is now the responsibility of the Almeida Foundation. You have no more control over it. She's safe, and I'm free." She hung up before he could reply, her hands shaking but her heart strangely light. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and for the first time in her life, Beatrice didn't feel fear. She felt power. The first few days in London were like living in a dream. The flat the company provided was in a modern building in Notting Hill, with wide windows, comfortable furniture, and a breathtaking view. Beatrice woke up every morning still half expecting to be back in the tiny room in the Cotswolds, and every morning she was surprised to find that this new life was real. The work was challenging and stimulating. She spent her days in meetings with experts, reviewing project proposals, developing strategies for community development programs. Gabriel had given her complete freedom to shape the division according to her vision, and Beatrice discovered that years of secret study and academic writing had prepared her perfectly for this moment. Helen had been transferred to a top-tier private hospital in London. Beatrice visited her every day after work, and for the first time, she saw colour returning to her mother's face. The doctors were optimistic. With proper treatment and without the constant stress of life with Robert, Helen was improving noticeably. But if Beatrice thought Robert would simply accept her departure, she was tragically mistaken. The first call came 3 days after she had settled in London. It was late at night, and Beatrice was reviewing documents when her personal phone rang. She hesitated when she saw Robert's name on the screen, but she answered, "Do you think you can defy me?" His voice was both ice and fire. "Do you think you can humiliate me and just run away?" "I didn't run away, Father. I accepted a job. You are my daughter. I decide what you do. I decide where you live, and you will come home now or I will make you regret the day you were born." Before Beatrice could respond, another voice came on the line. It was Gabriel. "Mr. Silver, this call is being recorded. Any further threats will be forwarded to the proper authorities. Beatrice is an adult and has made a legitimate professional choice. I suggest you respect that." "Who do you think you are?" Robert screamed. "You stole my daughter. You manipulated her. I gave her an opportunity she earned through her own merit. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do, and I suggest you occupy yourself with your own affairs." Gabriel hung up before Robert could reply. Beatrice stared at her phone, confused. "How were you on the line?" "I gave instructions for all your calls to be monitored," Gabriel explained when she called him back on his work number. "I suspected your father wouldn't take things peacefully. I want to ensure you're protected." And Beatrice realized that, for the first time in her life, someone was genuinely concerned for her safety and well-being, not as a tool or property, but as a person. But Robert didn't stop with phone calls. 2 days later, while Beatrice was in an important meeting with potential partners for a project in remote communities in the Scottish Highlands, her assistant entered the room with a worried expression. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation. You need to see this." In the building's lobby, a small crowd had formed. Beatrice went down and found Robert and Valentina surrounded by reporters and cameras. Her stomach sank. "My daughter has been taken," Robert was saying to the cameras, his voice thick with false anguish. "She's young, naive, vulnerable. This billionaire manipulated her, took advantage of her innocence. He's kidnapped her from our family." Valentina stood beside him, impeccably dressed, artificial tears streaming down her face. "Beatrice has always been so fragile, so easily influenced. We're desperate to bring her back home where she'll be safe." Beatrice stood frozen, watching the performance. They were constructing a completely false narrative, painting her as a helpless victim and Gabriel as a predator. And the reporters were buying every word. "Security, get these people out of here immediately," an authoritative voice cut through the chaos. It was Gabriel stepping out of the lift with his legal team. "And call a press conference. We're going to make an official statement." An hour later, the 30th floor conference room was packed with journalists. Gabriel stood at the podium, calm and controlled, but there was steel in his voice. "Good morning. I want to directly address the absurd allegations made by Mr. Robert Silver earlier today. Beatrice Silver has not been kidnapped, manipulated, or coerced in any way. She is a highly qualified adult professional who voluntarily accepted an executive position at this company based purely on her extraordinary merit." He gestured, and the screen behind him lit up, showing the covers of academic journals, article titles, quotes from experts. Beatrice Silva, under the pseudonym B. Santos, is the author of some of the most innovative work in social economics of the last 5 years. She has published in prestigious international journals. She has been cited by Nobel laureates. She is, without exaggeration, one of the most brilliant minds of her generation. The room fell completely silent. Beatrice, sitting beside Gabriel, felt all eyes on her. Her heart was beating so hard, she was sure everyone could hear it. "And now," Gabriel turned to her with an encouraging look, "I would like Beatrice to speak for herself." With trembling legs, Beatrice stood and walked to the podium. The camera flashes were blinding. She could see Robert and Valentina at the back of the room, their faces frozen in expressions of shock and horror. "My name is Beatrice Silva," she began, and her voice was surprisingly firm. "For years I lived as a shadow in my father's house. I was treated not as a daughter, but as a servant. I was ridiculed, belittled, and made invisible. But what my family never knew is that during all that time I was studying. I was writing, I was building an academic career they couldn't even imagine." She took a deep breath, feeling a courage she never knew she possessed. "My father is not here out of concern for me. He is here because he has lost control over me. For years he used my mother's illness as blackmail, threatening to cut off access to medical treatment whenever anyone in the family displeased him. It was a cruel and effective way to keep us trapped." Gasps echoed through the room. The reporters began to write furiously. "But now my mother is receiving proper medical care through the Almeida Foundation. She is safe, and I am finally free to live my own life, to use my talents to contribute to society in the way I've always dreamed. I am not a victim. I am an adult woman making informed choices about my own future." She looked directly at Robert, and for the first time in her life she didn't lower her eyes. "Mr. Gabriel Almeida didn't manipulate me. He liberated me. He saw value in me when my own family only saw shame, and for that I will be eternally grateful." The room erupted with questions. Robert tried to shout over the noise, but reporters were already turning to him with skeptical expressions. The narrative had completely flipped. Valentina pulled on Robert's arm. "Let's go, Daddy. This was a disaster." They left the building, pursued by cameras and aggressive questions. Beatrice watched them go, feeling a complex mixture of relief and sadness. There was no pleasure in publicly exposing her family, but it had been necessary. It was the only way to protect herself, to protect her mother, to ensure the truth was known. "You were incredible," Gabriel said after the press had left. "I know that wasn't easy." It wasn't, but it was necessary. In the following days, the story exploded across all media outlets. Beatrice Silva, the secret academic, the rejected daughter who built a brilliant career in the shadows. People were fascinated, and the more the story spread, the harder it became for Robert to maintain any narrative of victimhood. But Beatrice knew this wasn't the end. Robert was too proud, too greedy, too controlling to simply give up, and Valentina, raised in her father's image, shared his thirst for revenge. They would be back. It was only a matter of when and how. For now, though, Beatrice allowed herself to breathe. She allowed herself to enjoy the sunlit flat, the meaningful work, the afternoons with her mother, who was growing stronger every day. She allowed herself, for the first time, to imagine a future where she was not defined by her family, but by her own achievements. She was in her office late one night reviewing proposals for a new professional training program when Gabriel came in. "Still working? It's almost midnight." Beatrice smiled. "I could say the same about you." "Touché." He sat in the chair opposite her desk. "How are you adjusting? I know it's been a lot." "It has," Beatrice admitted, "but it's also been wonderful. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm in the right place, doing what I'm supposed to be doing." "You belong here," Gabriel said with conviction, "and no matter what your father tries, no matter what games he plays, you have my full support. We'll face him together." Together. The word resonated with Beatrice. She had never had a together before. It had always been her alone, always isolated. But now she had allies, she had support, she had people who believed in her. "Thank you." "Gabriel," she said softly. "For everything. For seeing me when no one else did. For giving me this chance. For helping me free my mother. I'll never forget it. You don't have to thank me. You earned this on your own merit. I just opened the door. You're the one walking through it with your own strength." And as Beatrice returned home that night, crossing the illuminated streets of London, she felt something she had never felt before. She felt seen. She felt valued. She felt finally like she mattered. But behind the scenes, far from Beatrice's eyes, Robert and Valentina were already plotting their next move. And this time, they would not make the mistake of underestimating the daughter they had always ignored. The following weeks brought new challenges that Beatrice hadn't anticipated. The press coverage had been largely positive, but it had also made her presence at the company highly visible, and not everyone was happy with her meteoric rise. The resistance came from unexpected places. Colleagues who had worked at the company for years looked at her with ill-disguised resentment. How could she, a newcomer with no formal business degree, no prior corporate experience, have been placed in such a senior executive position so quickly? Beatrice heard the whispers in the hallways, felt the stares when she entered meeting rooms. "She's his pet project," they would say. "She's only here because Gabriel Almeida has an interest in her. She has no real qualifications." The words hurt because they touched on insecurities she had carried for years. A part of her, the part her father had shaped with constant cruelty, whispered that maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't deserve to be there. But then she would look at the projects she was developing, read the impact reports, see the communities her programs were helping, and she knew her work spoke for itself. She belonged there not because of favoritism, but because of competence. The biggest obstacle, however, came from a place Beatrice hadn't expected: Julia Ferreira, Gabriel's personal assistant. Julia was 30 and had worked for Gabriel for 5 years. She was efficient, elegant, and completely devoted to her boss. Too devoted, Beatrice quickly realized. Julia saw Gabriel not just as an employer, but as something more. There was a possessiveness in how she guarded his time, in how she spoke about him, in how her eyes followed him in every meeting. And now Beatrice, with her dramatic story and constant access to Gabriel, was seen as a threat. The initial sabotage was subtle, meetings improperly scheduled, so Beatrice would arrive at empty rooms, important documents that never reached her desk, emails that mysteriously went missing, nothing that could be proven, but enough to create constant difficulties. Beatrice tried to speak with Julia directly. They were in the corridor near Gabriel's office when Beatrice approached her. "Julia, can we talk?" Julia turned, her professional smile perfectly in place. "Of course, Beatrice. What do you need?" "I've noticed some communication breakdowns lately. Documents not arriving, meetings with the wrong times. Do you think you could check the systems?" Julia's smile didn't waver, but her eyes turned cold. "Oh, what a shame. You know how technology is. Sometimes things just don't work as they should. I'll look into it." But nothing changed. If anything, the sabotage became more frequent. The breaking point came when Julia approached Beatrice with an unexpected invitation. There was a charity gala dinner at a 5-star hotel the following Saturday. All the company's executives would be there. "It would be an excellent opportunity for you to mingle with other leaders in the sector," Julia said with that perfect smile. "Make contacts, you know. Gabriel thinks you should go." Beatrice hesitated. She didn't have a suitable outfit for such an event. She barely had any clothes beyond the basic pieces she'd brought from home and a few inexpensive professional outfits she'd bought in her first few weeks. "I don't know if I have anything appropriate to wear." "Oh, don't worry about that," Julia said, and Beatrice should have recognized the trap in the smoothness of her voice. "It's just a casual dinner, nothing too formal." Of course it was a lie. When Beatrice arrived at the hotel that Saturday, wearing her best dress, which was still clearly inadequate, she immediately realized her mistake. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers. Women wore designer gowns that cost more than Beatrice's annual salary at any normal job. Men wore impeccable black tie. And there was Julia, stunning in a red silk gown, smiling when she saw Beatrice. "Oh, Beatrice, you came. What an, interesting choice of outfit." Beatrice felt her cheeks burn. Curious glances and a few stifled snickers came from nearby groups. She was about to turn and leave when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Beatrice, sorry for the delay." Gabriel was there, flawless in his tuxedo, but his eyes were concerned as he looked at her. "Didn't Julia mention I had sent stylists to your flat this afternoon?" Beatrice blinked, confused. "Stylists?" Gabriel turned to Julia, his voice suddenly icy. "Julia, did you not pass on my message?" Julia opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I must have forgotten, Mr. Almeida. I've been so busy." "I see." Gabriel said nothing more, but the message was clear. He knew exactly what Julia had done. "Beatrice, come with me, we'll sort this out." 20 minutes later, Beatrice was in a hotel suite with 3 stylists Gabriel had summoned. They worked quickly, transforming her. The dress they chose was elegant, but not ostentatious, in a deep blue that highlighted her eyes. They styled her hair, applied subtle but effective makeup. When Beatrice finally looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize the woman looking back. It wasn't the physical transformation that shocked her, but something in her eyes. There was confidence there was strength. She went back down to the ballroom on Gabriel's arm. Conversations stopped as they entered. Julia, who was in the center of a group of executives, froze. The dinner went well until the speeches. Beatrice was talking with a group of business leaders about sustainable development programs when Julia took the stage to make announcements. "And now," Julia said into the microphone, her smile as sharp as a knife, "I'd like to acknowledge some of our special guests tonight. We have industry leaders, innovators, philanthropists, and we also have Beatrice Silva, our newest charity case." The room went silent. Beatrice felt her blood run cold. Julia continued, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "It's so inspiring to see how Mr. Almeida helps those less fortunate. Beatrice comes from, shall we say, humble circumstances, and Gabriel has generously given her an opportunity. It's truly a testament to his kindness that he's willing to risk the company's reputation on someone so well inexperienced." Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Beatrice felt panic rise in her throat. This was exactly the kind of public humiliation she had endured at home. It was happening again, but now on a bigger stage, in front of people whose respect she needed. She felt Gabriel move beside her, ready to intervene, but Beatrice placed a hand on his arm. No, this time she would fight for herself. Beatrice stood and walked to the stage with steady steps. Julia looked at her in surprise as she came up and gently took the microphone from her hands. "Thank you, Julia, for that, interesting introduction." Beatrice turned to the audience, and her voice was clear and firm. "It's true that I come from difficult circumstances, but I'd like to clarify something. I am not a charity case. I am a qualified professional who earned her position through merit." She gestured to the tech team, who quickly projected the titles of her academic articles onto the screen behind her. "I have published 17 articles in peer-reviewed international journals over the last 4 years. My work on sustainable economic development has been cited by 3 Nobel laureates. I've been invited to speak at conferences in 6 countries." The room was completely silent now, all eyes fixed on the screen. "And as for my corporate inexperience, it's true I've never worked in an office before, but I have worked. Oh, how I've worked." She let a hint of emotion enter her voice. "I have worked since I was 15, keeping a house, caring for a sick mother, all while secretly studying and building an academic career that no one around me knew existed. If that isn't experience in multitasking, time management, and perseverance under pressure, then I don't know what is." Applause started, hesitant at first, then stronger. People began to stand. Beatrice looked at Julia, who was pale, and then at Gabriel, who was smiling with pride. "So yes," she continued, "I am grateful to Mr. Almeida, not for charity, but for recognizing talent where others only saw a servant, for valuing intelligence and hard work over pedigree and appearance, and for giving me the platform to finally use my gifts to make a real difference in the world." The ovation was deafening. Beatrice stepped down from the stage and was immediately surrounded by people wanting to talk, ask questions, exchange cards. Julia had quietly disappeared into the crowd. Later, as the event was winding down, Gabriel found Beatrice on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. "You were magnificent," he said. "It was terrifying," Beatrice admitted, "but it was also liberating. For the first time I stood up for myself publicly. I didn't wait for someone to save me." "You don't need saving. You are more than capable of fighting your own battles." He hesitated, then continued, "I'm going to have to fire Julia. What she did was unacceptable." Beatrice was silent for a moment. She felt no pleasure in it, but she also knew she couldn't work in an environment where she was actively sabotaged. "I understand. It's the right decision." In the following days, the story of Beatrice's speech spread. Videos went viral on social media. She started receiving invitations for lectures, interviews, academic collaborations. But success brought new dangers. Because as Beatrice gained respect and recognition, Robert and Valentina watched from the shadows, their rage growing. And Julia, fired and humiliated, was more than willing to join them in their quest for revenge. The storm was gathering, and Beatrice, at the center of her triumphant new life, had no idea how devastating it would be. 3 months had passed since the gala, and Beatrice finally felt like she was hitting her stride. Her social development division was flourishing. The projects she had implemented in remote communities in the Scottish Highlands and in urban slums in Manchester were showing impressive results. Employment rates were rising. Families were escaping extreme poverty. Children were gaining access to quality education. The major presentation was scheduled for 2 weeks' time. Beatrice would present the results of her work to an auditorium full of investors, international partners, and the media. It was the chance to secure massive funding to expand the programs across the country. She had worked tirelessly on the presentation, every slide carefully crafted, every piece of data rigorously checked. What Beatrice didn't know was that while she was working on her presentation, a conspiracy was forming in the shadows. Julia Ferreira had left the company in disgrace, but she hadn't disappeared. She had rented a small flat in London, living off her savings while nursing her resentment. How could Gabriel have chosen that interloper over her? Julia had dedicated 5 years of her life to that company, to that man, and had been discarded as if she were worthless. It was in an obscure cafe in Notting Hill that Julia found unlikely allies. Valentina Silva was sitting alone, flicking through fashion magazines with a bitter expression. Julia recognized her from the photos she'd seen during the media coverage of Beatrice's rise. "You're her sister, aren't you?" Julia approached the table. Valentina looked up, her eyes sharp. "And you're the assistant who got fired. I've heard about you." They ordered coffee, and over the next hour discovered they shared a common enemy and an equally intense desire for revenge. "She stole my life," Valentina said, her voice trembling with contained anger. "I was the beautiful daughter, the perfect daughter. I was supposed to marry Gabriel Almeida. I was supposed to be living in luxury, admired and envied, but that ugly thing showed up and ruined everything." Julia leaned forward. "She stole Gabriel from me. I was so close. A few more months and he would have realized I was the right choice. But then she appeared with her sob stories, and he became obsessed with saving her." The two women looked at each other, and a silent understanding passed between them. "We need to destroy her," Valentina said simply. "Completely. Not just her reputation, but this whole fake life she's built." Julia smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I have an idea." Days later, Robert Silva appeared at the same cafe. Valentina had arranged the meeting. Her father was thinner, more bitter. The public exposure had ruined his social standing. Friends had distanced themselves. Business opportunities had evaporated. He blamed it all on Beatrice. As Julia explained the plan, Robert listened with growing interest and approval. It was cruel. It was public. And if it worked, it would destroy Beatrice so completely that she would never recover. The plan required perfect timing and access to inside information. Julia, despite being fired, still had contacts at the company, people she had helped over the years who owed her favors. It was through one of these contacts that she discovered the details of Beatrice's major presentation. She also discovered something more valuable. Beatrice had a habit of leaving her laptop at the office some nights, locked in a drawer. The security system had blind spots, and Julia's contact had access to the door codes. Meanwhile, Beatrice was completely oblivious to the danger. She spent her evenings finalizing the presentation, her days in preparatory meetings. The pressure was intense, but she felt energized. This would be her moment to prove, not just to others but to herself, that she was capable of great things. Helen had improved so much that the doctors were talking about discharging her soon. The idea of having her mother living nearby, safe and healthy, filled Beatrice with joy. They could finally build the relationship they never had the chance to when Robert controlled everything. A week before the presentation, Beatrice worked late reviewing the final slides. It was almost 11 at night when she finally saved the document and decided to leave the laptop at the office. She would be back early the next morning anyway. What she didn't see was the hooded figure that entered the building 2 hours later, using a cloned keycard. She didn't see this figure disable the security cameras on the executive floor. She didn't see her desk drawer being forced open, the laptop being turned on, files being copied and replaced. In the morning, when Beatrice opened her laptop, she noticed nothing different. The presentation was there, seemingly intact. She reviewed it one more time, satisfied with her work. In the following days, the tension mounted. The media was covering the impending event. Beatrice had become a public figure, a symbol of resilience and triumph over adversity. The pressure to succeed was immense. Gabriel noticed the stress in Beatrice. They were in his office 2 days before the presentation when he said, "You're pushing yourself too hard. You've reviewed this presentation 1,000 times. It's perfect." "I just want to make sure everything is right," Beatrice said, rubbing her tired eyes. "This is the biggest opportunity I've ever had. I can't mess it up." "You won't mess it up. Your work speaks for itself. The data is irrefutable. The investors are going to be impressed." If only Gabriel knew how wrong he was. The night before the presentation, Julia, Robert and Valentina met one last time. The plan was in motion. Julia had the replacement files ready, humiliating images she had obtained through her contacts, photos of Beatrice in her days of serving the family, wearing aprons and carrying trays. She also had fake messages, carefully fabricated to look like a romantic correspondence between Beatrice and Gabriel, suggesting their relationship was far more than professional. "Tomorrow," Julia said, "when Beatrice turns on the projector, these are the images that will appear. Not her professional slides, but photos of her as a maid. Messages suggesting she slept her way to the top, in front of investors, the media, everyone. And we'll be there," Robert added. "Valentina and I will storm in with camera crews I've already hired. We'll publicly rescue her, prove she was manipulated, that Gabriel is using her. The scandal will destroy them both." Valentina smiled, satisfied. "Finally, that gutter rat will be put back in her place, and I'll have my revenge." The day of the presentation dawned bright and sunny. Beatrice woke early, her stomach in knots with nerves but also excitement. She put on her best suit, a navy blue ensemble Gabriel had insisted she accept as a gift. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw not the insecure girl from months ago, but a confident professional ready to present her work. The Almeida Enterprises auditorium was enormous, with seating for 500 people. When Beatrice arrived, it was already half full. Investors from around the world, representatives from NGOs, journalists, all chatting animatedly. The energy was palpable. Gabriel met her backstage. "Ready?" "More than ready," Beatrice said, and she believed it. Outside, hidden among the crowd still entering, were Robert, Valentina, and Julia. Robert had brought 2 cameramen in disguise. Julia had her phone ready to film. Valentina wore dark sunglasses, nervous but excited. "It's about to start," Julia whispered. "When the images appear and the confusion begins, you go in. Rescue Beatrice, create chaos. The media will love it." The auditorium lights dimmed. Gabriel walked onto the stage to make the introduction. He presented Beatrice with warm, sincere words, highlighting her achievements, her character, her vision. The audience applauded as Beatrice took the stage. She smiled, took a deep breath, and clicked the remote to begin her presentation. And that's when it all fell apart. The first image that appeared on the giant screen was not a chart of economic impact. It was a photo of Beatrice at 17, wearing a shabby apron carrying plates in her father's house. The second was worse, showing her on her knees scrubbing the floor. Then came the fake messages, projected for the entire auditorium to see, filled with innuendo and suggestions of an improper relationship. The auditorium erupted in shocked murmurs. Beatrice stood frozen, the remote falling from her hands. She stared at the screen, at the images that were not her slides, and felt the world crumble around her. It was the ultimate humiliation, the definitive nightmare, and it was happening in front of hundreds of people, broadcast live to thousands online. And it was at that moment, at Beatrice's lowest point, that the auditorium doors burst open and Robert and Valentina stormed in with their cameras, ready to deliver the final blow. Chaos engulfed the auditorium. Robert strode down the central aisle like a righteous avenger, Valentina at his side, cameras capturing every moment. His voice thundered over the uproar from the shocked audience. "My daughter! I've come to rescue her from this man who manipulated and used her. She is the victim of a predator who took advantage of her innocence." On stage, Beatrice was paralyzed, staring at the horrific images on the screen and at the father advancing towards her. It was the worst moment of her life, all her achievements being publicly destroyed, all the old humiliations resurfacing in an amplified form. She could see Julia at the back of the room, smiling triumphantly. She could see the shock and confusion on the investors' faces. Gabriel was moving onto the stage to intervene when a powerful voice echoed through the sound system. "Sit down, all of you." The voice was female, authoritative, and carried a weight that made even Robert stop mid-stride. From the wings of the stage emerged an elegant woman in her late 60s, impeccably dressed, with grey hair in a sophisticated chignon. It was Teresa Almeida, Gabriel's mother, and the family matriarch. She rarely appeared at public events, preferring to remain behind the scenes, but her presence commanded absolute respect. Teresa walked to the center of the stage with measured steps, picked up the microphone Beatrice had dropped, and looked at Robert with an expression that could freeze hell over. "Mr. Robert Silva," she said, each word as heavy as lead, "how interesting that you choose this moment for your dramatic rescue. How convenient that you brought cameras. How opportune that this coincides with the most important presentation of Beatrice's career." "My daughter has been manipulated." Robert tried to regain control of the narrative. "This man, your son, took advantage of a vulnerable young woman." "Vulnerable?" Teresa raised an eyebrow. "The young woman who published 17 internationally acclaimed academic articles, who built a secret career while being treated as a servant in your house. That doesn't sound like vulnerability, Mr. Silva. That sounds like extraordinary strength." She gestured to the tech team. "Fortunately, I have something that might clarify this situation. You see, I monitored the original meeting between Mr. Silva and my son a few months ago, and being a cautious woman, I ensured that meeting was recorded." The giant screen flickered, the humiliating images disappearing. In their place appeared a recording of Gabriel's meeting room, dated months earlier. The picture was crystal clear, the audio perfect. In the recording, Robert and Valentina entered the room. Robert was selling Valentina like a commodity, listing her qualities as if negotiating livestock. Her beauty, her obedience, how she would be a perfect wife to elevate Gabriel's status. The recorded Gabriel listened with an increasingly cold expression. When Robert finished his pitch, Gabriel said with devastating clarity, "Mr. Silva, your eldest daughter is one of the most vacuous and cruel people I have ever met. 5 minutes of conversation with her was enough to realize she doesn't have an original thought or an ounce of compassion in her body." The audience let out audible gasps. In the room, Valentina had gone white as a sheet. The recording continued. "But I have heard of your other daughter," the on-screen Gabriel said. "I've tracked down the articles by B. Santos. They are brilliant, transformative. If you want any kind of alliance with me, it will be by bringing me Beatrice, the true jewel of your family that you treat like dirt." The recorded Robert had laughed with disdain. "That useless girl? You must be joking. But if you insist, I'll send her. It will be useful for you to realize how superior Valentina is in comparison." The recording ended. The silence in the auditorium was absolute. All eyes turned to Robert, whose face had gone from red with rage to white with panic. "So," Teresa said, her voice as sharp as steel, "it was not my son who manipulated Beatrice, it was you, Mr. Silver, who tried to manipulate the situation for your own gain. You who sold your daughters like commodities. You who, when your plan failed, created this pathetic rescue spectacle." Beatrice, still on stage, felt tears of relief begin to fall, but the show wasn't over yet. The auditorium doors opened again, but this time it was a different entrance. Helen Silver walked in, supported by a nurse but walking on her own 2 feet, stronger than Beatrice had seen her in years. Her mother crossed the auditorium with quiet dignity, climbed the steps to the stage and stood beside Beatrice. Robert froze at the sight of his wife. "Helen?" Helen took a microphone offered by Teresa and looked at the man she had been married to for over 25 years. When she spoke, her voice was weak but steady, each word an effort but carrying absolute truth. "For 25 years I watched you destroy our younger daughter. I saw you humiliate her, belittle her, treat her as if she were invisible. And I did nothing because you controlled my life through my illness. You threatened to cut off my medication, my treatment whenever anyone challenged you." She paused to breathe, the nurse stepping closer in concern, but Helen waved her back. "You shaped Valentina in your image, turning her into someone as cruel and empty as yourself. But Beatrice, my sweet Beatrice, she resisted. She remained kind, intelligent, compassionate, despite everything you did to her. And when she finally had a chance to escape, she flew." Helen turned to the audience, tears streaming down her pale face. "My daughter was not manipulated or used, she was recognized. Gabriel Almeida saw what her own father never bothered to look for. A brilliant mind, a pure heart, an extraordinary person who deserved a chance to shine." Robert tried one last time to regain control. "You're ill, Helen. You don't know what you're saying. You're being influenced." But his voice sounded weak now, desperate, and as security guards began to advance towards him, he realized he had lost. Completely, irrevocably lost. Teresa took command again. "Mr. Silver, Miss Valentina Silver, and Miss Julia Ferreira," she said, pointing to Julia, who was trying to sneak towards the exit. "You have committed trespassing, corporate sabotage, defamation, and attempted fraud. We have it all on security recordings, including your illegal entry into the building a week ago to tamper with Beatrice's computer." Julia had been caught trying to leave. Security guards escorted her back. She was screaming, trying to defend herself, but the cameras Robert had brought were capturing her hysterical confession. The three were escorted out of the auditorium by security, followed by police officers Teresa had prudently summoned before the event. The cameras captured everything, but now it was Robert, Valentina, and Julia who were the exposed villains, not Beatrice. When the door finally closed behind them, the auditorium fell silent again. Everyone was looking at Beatrice, who was on stage, hugging her mother and crying. Gabriel walked onto the stage and gently took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I apologize for the disruption, but I think you have all just witnessed something important. You have witnessed what happens when talent is suppressed, when cruelty tries to destroy goodness, when power is used to control instead of to liberate." He turned to Beatrice. "And you have also witnessed what happens when someone with extraordinary strength is finally given the opportunity to shine." He signaled to the tech team. "Now, if you'll allow me, I'd like you to see what Beatrice actually prepared, the real presentation before it was sabotaged." The screen changed again, this time showing Beatrice's legitimate slides, charts showing economic impact, photos of transformed communities, testimonials from families lifted out of poverty, rigorous data demonstrating the effectiveness of the programs. It was world-class work, a transformative vision expressed with clarity and passion. Beatrice, still trembling from the trauma of the last few minutes, forced herself to pull together. This was her presentation, her moment, and she would not let Robert steal this from her too. She began to speak, her voice gaining strength as she delved into the work she loved. For an hour, she presented. She answered questions with deep knowledge and genuine passion. She discussed methodologies, debated metrics, shared visions for expansion. And as she spoke, the audience was won over not by drama or sympathy, but by pure, undeniable competence. When she finished, the ovation was deafening. Investors stood up. Funding proposals started immediately. What should have been total destruction had transformed into absolute triumph. Beatrice looked at the standing audience, at the faces full of admiration and respect, and felt something break inside her, the last invisible chain that bound her to the past. She was no longer the rejected daughter. She was no longer the invisible girl who scrubbed floors and served meals. She was Beatrice Silva, a recognized professional, a brilliant mind, an agent of change, and no one ever could take that away from her again. In the months that followed, life changed once again for Beatrice, but this time on the solid foundation of real achievement. The programs she had developed received massive funding and were expanded across the country. She was invited to speak at universities, international conferences, and on television shows. Her personal story, now widely known, inspired millions. Young people from deprived communities wrote to her, sharing their own dreams and struggles. Beatrice replied when she could, always remembering that each message represented someone who needed to be seen, just as she had. She created a special mentorship program for talented youths from dysfunctional families, offering not just academic opportunities, but emotional and financial support. It was her way of ensuring no one else had to hide their gifts in the shadows, terrified of those who were supposed to love them. Robert and Valentina lost everything in the public fallout. The family fortune, built largely on appearances and social connections, evaporated. They moved to a small town in the countryside, living quietly, ruined not just financially, but socially and morally. Beatrice heard from mutual acquaintances that Robert had aged dramatically, the weight of public shame stooping his shoulders. Valentina, deprived of beauty salons and constant attention, had lost the artificial shine she had always cultivated. Beatrice felt no pleasure in their downfall, only a distant sadness for what could have been if her family had chosen love over control, compassion over cruelty. Through intermediaries, she sent an offer of financial help for basic needs, which Robert refused with wounded pride. Some people, Beatrice realized, would rather drown in their own pride than accept a hand from those they had belittled. Julia faced criminal charges for corporate sabotage. She eventually agreed to a plea deal that included community service and mandatory counseling. Helen moved into a comfortable flat near Beatrice. Her health continued to improve with proper treatment and the absence of stress. Mother and daughter were finally able to build the relationship that should have always existed, spending afternoons talking, laughing, and healing the wounds of the past together. A year after the presentation, Beatrice was in her office when Gabriel came in with champagne. "What are we celebrating?" she asked. "Your program just won the International Award for Sustainable Development. You're going to Geneva to receive it next week, and your mother is coming with you." Beatrice felt tears of joy. From the invisible maid in a Cotswolds mansion to the winner of an international award, walking across a stage in Geneva with her mother in the audience. The journey seemed impossible, but it had happened, and most importantly, she hadn't become cruel or bitter in the process. She had kept her humanity, her kindness, her empathy, even after all she had suffered. "You deserve this," Gabriel said. "All of it. You earned it through hard work, intelligence, and a resilience few possess." "I couldn't have done it without you," Beatrice said. "You gave me a chance when no one else would." "I just opened the door. You walked through it and built an empire." That night, Beatrice had dinner with Helen at their favorite restaurant overlooking the illuminated city. They talked about the future, about new projects, about the life they were building together. Helen had gained a healthy weight, color had returned to her cheeks, and she laughed with a lightness Beatrice had never seen before. It was as if, free from Robert, her mother was rediscovering who she truly was. The woman she had been before her marriage suffocated her essence. "I'm so proud of you," Helen said, holding her daughter's hand. "I always knew you were special. I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to protect you. I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. You protected me in the only way. You could, Mum, you survived. And your silence taught me something important. Sometimes survival is the bravest form of resistance. You waited for the right moment, and when it came, you spoke, and your words changed everything. Free. The word resonated between them, heavy with meaning. Beatrice looked out the window at London spread below, millions of lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there were people like she had been, trapped in impossible situations, their talents hidden, their voices silenced. And she was dedicating her life to helping them, to creating opportunities, to opening doors. She thought of Gabriel, who had chosen to see beyond appearances and recognize value where others only saw shame. She thought of Teresa, who had appeared at the crucial moment with the evidence that saved everything. She thought of all the people who, throughout her journey, had chosen to be allies instead of enemies, bridges instead of walls. She had been sent to the billionaire as a cruel joke, a contrast to make her sister shine. But instead of accepting the role assigned to her, she had written her own destiny. She had proven that worth comes not from appearance or family approval, but from character, work, and the courage to be authentic. And in the process, she discovered something her father would never understand, that true power comes not from controlling others, but from liberating yourself. Beatrice's journey wasn't about revenge or proving something to those who had rejected her. It was about discovering her own value, her own voice, her own strength. And in that discovery, she had transformed not only her own life, but the lives of thousands of others. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from a young woman in a community in the north of England where Beatrice's programs operated. The message included a photo of the young woman holding a vocational training certificate, smiling broadly, full of hope and possibility. Beatrice smiled. This was the real triumph, not Robert's humiliation or her professional success, though both were satisfying. The real triumph was knowing that her pain, her struggle, her work had created paths for others to escape their own prisons. She had been the ugly daughter, the invisible daughter, the worthless daughter. But in the end, she discovered she had always been the daughter with the most value of all. She just needed someone else to see it, and then she needed to see it in herself. And now, looking towards the future with her mother by her side and a world of possibilities ahead, Beatrice finally understood a fundamental truth. No one could define her worth but herself. And her worth, she had discovered, was limitless.